Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to Different Angles. It's all about perspective. And I'm Avra.
And my name is Yuko. And we are here once again to share different perspectives about recognition as well as validation for today. Now, do be reminded that all the things that we share today are not purely based off our own thoughts and points of views, and they're not based off any medical diagnosis or advice. These are all given based on our respective learning as well as educational backgrounds.
Wow. So Yuka, today we're discussing validation. So why do you think we really need to know about validation and recognition?
Very good question right there. I think validation and recognition are two very important concepts that we really need to learn in order to learn how to better communicate with the people around us. In fact, in the generation of today, there's so many issues regarding people feeling insecure, feeling like they are not appreciated, whether it's at work or in your personal relationships or in your families, right? There's so many ways that we can feel we're not accepted. And I think this is a very good topic we should approach today.
Absolutely. I mean, because really validation is a recognition and acceptance of another person's internal experience or being valid. And the emotional validation is a distinction from emotional invalidation, in which your own or other person's emotion and experiences are rejected, ignored, or judged. So just what you've just been saying, one can feel very judged or rejected. So we can also experience something called self-validation, which is when we have recognition and acknowledgement of our internal experience. The validation does not mean that you have to agree with someone or whether you're supporting their feelings or thoughts. Validation is just about really understanding and listening. So validation doesn't even mean love. You can validate someone you don't like, although I must admit, I probably wouldn't want to validate someone I didn't like, but we need to look at it and say, give this person credit. This is where it's due. Even if we don't particularly like that person, shouldn't mar the accepts. We have a situation where very recently in the tennis sector, and it's a very controversial situation where there was a tennis player, names not mentioned to protect the guilty, who decided to enter another country without a vaccination and wanted to play on the tennis circuit. And there was endless outcry. But was his tennis skills validated? He even got stripped of his winning trophy. So fair enough. He needed to maybe take responsibility or ownership for breaking a law or thinking he was better and having an ego for something else, whatever that is. That is not something I can judge on. What I'm trying to describe here is the fact that his ability to be an awesome sportsman was taken away by his trophy being taken away from him. His actions to what happened had nothing to do with his ability to be an excellent sportsman. And that's what he should have got validation for. So, it's like, have you ever wished you could take back what you said when you were emotionally upset, or you wanted to be really supportive to someone and helpful to someone, and you really love them, but because of your own emotions, you made it difficult. So communicating when you are overwhelmed with an emotion doesn't usually work very well. It's not really a pleasant experience. So for someone that's emotionally sensitive, managing their emotions can communicate most effectively and with the best resolve when they learn to manage the intense emotions they experience maybe on a regular basis. So the validation from others may very well be the best tool to help that kind of person who's very emotional or sensitive, if you're giving them the validation that they need. And that manages their emotions effectively. Now, there's another area which we can look at where we can really help ourselves. And isn't this what we really do in coaching? We help people help themselves. We don't tell people what to do. So self-validation is one of the great ways of emotionally sensitive people to manage their own feelings. So let them take the validation. And self-validation is a step that comes before self-compassion. So you're slightly removing the emotional factor here. You're saying, acknowledging your internal experience, you're not ignoring it, and it does exist. And then it's understandable that it comes before understanding your validation. So understand why you need to be validated, what you have done right. Regardless of how you're feeling inside, you are still capable of being validated. So validation is really a simple concept to understand, but it's not always easy to put into practice. So if you really are having this situation, validation communicates an acceptance from yourself or from somebody else.
It's wonderful points that you've actually talked about, Avra. I've never thought about the concept of self-validation. I've thought about how to validate somebody else, but I never really thought about how do I validate myself, especially when I'm an emotionally sensitive person. You know, validation is so important to people who are like emotionally sensitive, like what you mentioned, right? Because we as humans have a need to belong. And that feeling of needing to belong and be accepted, it's very calming for people like us to know that you're validated, you're accepted. It brings a sense of peace. And what we mean by acceptance in this case is to acknowledge that the value of yourself is there. Like you have value and fellow human beings also have value. So you have value in yourself and you also have value in other people's eyes. So validation in this case helps you to let the person know that they have value in your eyes. So we all know that life, you know, can be confusing. It can be very difficult. Nowadays, we have everything thrown in us. Some days we have good day. We wake up on the good side of the bed. Some days we wake up on the bad side of the bed. And this brings out different kinds of experiences for each one of us. And of course, all these experiences eventually get internalized. So your experience does not have to be the same as somebody else's experience, but it does help to be affirmed that each one of our experiences are understandable and that each one of this experience are valid. So validation in this case helps us to regulate our emotions, especially if you're slightly more sensitive. Knowing that we are heard and we are understood is actually a really powerful and empowering experience. And it actually helps to relieve that sense of anxiety and urgency within us. Some people say that, this feeling of not being understood actually creates this sense of like, oh, I'm left out, or I'm not fitting in, I'm not validated, I don't belong to these groups. And then these negative thoughts then lead to fear and sometimes maybe even panic, because the importance of being part of a group is very critical for survival. We all know since the early days, right, of mankind, the potential loss of love, of acceptance, of being in a community has always been a basic danger for each one of us. So we do need this basic need to feel accepted and validated. So the truth is, validation does help to soothe one person's emotional upsetness. So if you're feeling somebody is really upset, maybe one way or another, they're getting invalidated by somebody.
Well, I think also it's about being able to be heard. You need someone to really listen to you and acknowledge and understand you. And the validation that you're talking about here when someone is upset is probably because they've been criticized or judged. So validation will also help you build an identity. Now, what I mean by that is that validation is like a reflection of yourself, the thoughts that you have by another person. So it's looking backwards, looking at yourself and doing an introspective look of who am I, what am I thinking, what are my core values. Your values and patterns and choices are highlighted, and that helps people see their own personality characteristics a lot more clearly. Because validation builds relationships. If you're feeling heard, you're feeling that you're doing things right, then you feel more accepted. And this is related to and connected and released when someone validates you. So when someone says to you, good job, or I hear you, or I'm understanding what you're saying, well done on what your values were there. You feel heard, and this builds an understanding and an effective communication. So if you sit with your mouth absolutely closed and someone's bubbling off on their venture about what they believe in and what they're feeling, and you not acknowledging and validating what they're saying. It's not necessarily that you have to agree with them, but that you're validating. Then you are forming a relationship with them. This helps rapport. And you are having effective communication where human beings are limited in what they can see, hear, and understand becomes a broader spectrum so that you start to open up more. You don't just look at what you're saying, you look at what you're seeing, you look at what you hear, you look at what you feel. And when you do all these things, two people can watch the same event occur. You could watch something and I could watch something, and we could have a totally different idea or a understanding of what that situation is. So validation is a way of understanding another person's point of view. Because if I had to say to you, I saw or understood what you were saying in a certain manner, you have an opportunity to correct me and say to me, well, I never meant it like that. And the communication is better because you're then validating what you said.
Thank you for offering me your perspective. I completely agree, and I completely validate what you've just said. Thank you for sharing with me your point of view too, Avra. Validation is like what you've mentioned itself. You give to accept the other person's perspective. And it also, in this case, shows that the other person, you're important, right? So whether or not the person being validated is a child, a significant other, a spouse, a parent that you have, a friend that you have, or an employee, or even people like, me and Avra right here, validation communicates that you're important to them and they're important to you, and you care about their thoughts and feelings and experiences. You want to let the other person know that you are really there for them. Now, another thing that validation does is that it helps us to persevere. Sometimes, when change is extremely difficult, some of us have a higher capacity for change. Some of us have a lower capacity for change. Whatever capacities we have, recognizing how someone is handling and managing this challenge helps them to keep towards their goal. Somehow or other, validation does help to replenish this willpower. In my experience, more often than it may seem, validation always brings about results that are well worth your effort. You may not think that it's much, but actually to them, it's a lot.
Yeah, well, I can understand that, because even though this is a simple concept, it's not so easy, is it? And you've got to remember, however, that if you are totally reliant on validation, you will find you are left wanting. It's tragic that we recognize our self-worth from only an external validation. When you're just relying on other people to lift you up and make you feel worthy, it's going to fall apart for you. Because if external validation was our only most significant measure, we would feel totally useless. So before you look for validation in others, you have to find that validation in yourself. What do you mean I have to wait for someone's approval? I'm actually somebody, so I approve, okay? I'm saying, so I give myself permission to go forward and with my full support, pom-poms waving, well done, Avra, you've got this, okay? I want to know that inside myself, in my intuitive mind, I have already decided in my gut feeling, I've got this. And if you are strongly feeling that you are really on top of your game and that you've got this, you don't have to need someone else's validation. Of course, it's wonderful to have someone giving you that recognition. But the point I'm making here is that we don't need to have that. It's amazing. Something happens when you stop seeking approval and validation. And you know what? When you stop seeking it, you actually find it. When you stop believing in yourself, you are giving yourself personal power. You're giving your power away every time you seek validation from somebody else, because you know you're right, but you want them to be acknowledging you for who you are. Needing validation is how you damage your self-worth by continually looking for approval from others. So we're not disregarding the fact that we all need a lift up. We all need to acknowledge that somebody's done well. We're just saying you can't permanently rely on others in order to keep you going. So until you accept and approve of yourself, no amount of approval from anybody else will keep you secure. If you're understanding the point where I'm coming from. So I'm not poo-pooing anything to do with the thought that we need some recognition and validation. I'm just saying it can't be your sole need. If we were in constant need of approval from other people, it could be a sign of that the approval that we receive internally simply isn't enough. So someone else is not giving me approval, I'm not good enough. You shouldn't have to have that need. You should not rely on the opinions of validation of your internal progression. Freedom on the inside comes when validation from the outside has no value and doesn't matter. So that's quite an important point for me. So you look at someone who's a conformist, they're filled with a need for approval. They can never get enough. He goes from one person to another. You know, those people that have to ask 6 people if something was good enough that they did. They have to check with 5 people that they feel as strongly and passionate about what they're doing. And those endorsements for their behaviors and action is saying to me, are you good enough? You don't need anyone's affection or approval in order to be good enough. You have to be good enough all on your own.
That is so true. We have to know that we're actually good enough before we can tell somebody that they're good enough. You know, whatever comes from within goes out. So when we talk about validation and recognition, there is this wonderful term that I would love to introduce to you, Avra. It's called structured recognition. Now, like the name implies, structured recognition is a very deliberate approach to recognizing and rewarding people. We can see that in companies or effective managers who believe in complimenting their employees. You know, for example, awards like Employee of the Month or Long Service Awards, they all recognize the employees for the hard work and efforts that they've given to the company. No employee would hate this kind of praise on a company level because everyone feels truly validated, right? However, such structured recognition is actually not very easy to find. We can only have one employee of the month for each month, and that would mean that each company has limited chances to recognize all their employees, especially if you're a really big company. So this could cause internal strife if employees all vie or or argue for this spot itself, or they're just working hard to make sure that, oh, I get rewarded for that month. So there's the other way of recognizing them. That's what we call the unstructured recognition. So unstructured recognition, on the other hand, is when we practice it through rewarding without formal awards. Right. Simply by having your team members. Your team members, all you have to do is just come together. Let's recognize each other. Let's talk good about each other. This helps to build team camaraderie as well as to pull the company forward. So in such cases, you probably don't need a huge budget to make it happen. And it's also more timely because it's not planned beforehand. So it's a little bit more flexible, it's a little bit more spontaneous. So this unstructured appreciation is basically helping and allowing you to celebrate in the moment, right there and right then.
Yeah, correct. Absolutely. And you know, Yuka, this is not just in the corporate environment. This is in our personal environment too. We have to take the time to be verbal and written and oral in our appreciation, okay? So it can be beneficial for sharing an appreciation in the thought of the moment, okay? Many people find value in a quick, great job during a presentation or a quick speech about a job well done during a meeting, especially if they value words of affirmation. So they're wanting to hear it, okay? From a personal point of view, it's lovely to hear someone tell you that they're valued and appreciation. It gives you recognition for what you do. Mm-hmm. Verbal appreciation can be challenging for people because, you know, it's in the moment. So it's so much reflection that can be done on something you've heard in a meeting once. So on the other hand, Maybe the written appreciation can be varied for a long time too. Taking the time to actually write and send a thank you note. Somebody comes to you for dinner. How nice is it just to send a WhatsApp and say, what a delicious dinner. Thank you for your effort. Really enjoyed your evening. It's so simple to send a little note of appreciation and gratitude. You don't have to take a long time if you want to write a note. You could just send a wonderful emoji. The whole point of technology with all these wonderful icons, emojis, bitmojis, whatever, just send a thumbs up, a big heart, whatever. You are then still validating somebody's effort. So writing things down really helps build confidence and excitement to continue improvement. Even in the office space, if you write a little email, a little note to someone that says, well done, thank you.
Honestly, if I was that waitress that's receiving that handwritten note, I would be so happy, to be honest. You know, Avra, ever since I was a kid, I love rewards. I love notes of affirmation. I mean, who doesn't, right? I remember that there was once I asked my mom to get me a gift for scoring A's, for acing all my exams. And she truly did. And it was just so memorable an experience itself. That sense of reward can be really satisfying. Now, the thing is that rewards can come in many forms. It doesn't just have to be cash or gift cards. It can be simply providing something that that person really longs for or really loves, you know? A few other examples of rewards could include things like experiences, getting a hotel stay, a staycation, or bringing them just out to have a meal, you know, just treating them to a free meal, or maybe for employees, you could feature them in your company newsletter or in the social media itself, just to highlight, you know, their efforts. Other than rewards, one other way that people and many people here today desire is to be validated is through positive feedback. So you may be wondering, how do we actually implement positive feedback? Usually when I get feedback, it's always, oh, you can improve in this. Oh, you can do better in that, right? So what is positive feedback? Now, positive feedback, two forms. One, public praise. So in terms of public praise, is giving praise to that person in a way that does not just simply involve he or she himself or herself alone. So it's not just the recipient themselves, but also other people around them. For example, you may publicly recognize someone during a meeting or during a company event. It is also a good idea to make sure that you praise this person in public and criticize them or give negative feedback privately. So your goal with sharing with this person on what is doing right is to make sure that, you know, you're lifting everybody up, lifting all the spirits up. Hey, this person is doing this thing right. Let's follow this. It's a good role model. And always make a note that if you want to deliver any kinds of criticism, do not do it in public. Do it, you know, in privately. Although sometimes public praise may not be everyone's cup of tea. You know, an introvert or somebody that's slightly more shy may not fancy that because it might make them feel like, oh, I don't know how to react to all these, you know, attention and all this positivity. So it's actually very important to get to know somebody and go with what actually makes them comfortable. For example, being in the limelight for these people, for sure, is not what they would love to be. Then in this case, you go for number two, private praise. Now, private praise is the praise that you give to somebody one-on-one or behind closed doors, which makes this also a very wonderful personal experience for that person. Some people thrive on privacy. They love it. They love being private person, right? They don't enjoy public praise. So the best thing that you can do is to make sure that you supplement them with private praise, even a quick message, or like, you know what Avra mentioned, a verbal note, a handwritten note to just let them know, hey, you're doing a great job. You're doing really well. I'm so proud of you. This could work wonders. Giving regular private praises like this doesn't have to be time consuming.
Exactly. So when do you think is the best place to give recognition? Maybe last, but certainly not least, is to talk about when to recognize and reward people, because you also don't want to overdo it. You don't want to be the sort of rah-rah people that everybody now doesn't actually look at it as validation anymore. It just becomes a known thing. Oh, well, Sammy was, you know, great employee of the week this week, and next week Sammy was the week, and so it goes on. So you have to give some credit to each person and let it be when is the right time. So it's a multi-threaded approach to appreciation. It's always best. So here are the main reasons and milestones that merit some positive reinforcement. They probably are when you've completed a project or goal achievement. Now remember, as you set about to crush quarterly or yearly goals, you want to show your appreciation for the follow-through, rewarding for performance, the perfect way to show someone how you care and appreciate them doing the job best. Well done. But this also applies to us personally. So even if you are doing something really great for somebody, let them know. That's also recognition and admiration. So while performance-based recognition is very impactful, you might think it's related to longer-term goals. So effort-based rewards might be something that you like to take to a smaller amount of effort, yet it's actually really important. Recognizing those who meet things just by effort, not necessarily by result. So for example, when my kids were at school, there was a netball trophy for the best netball player. And I decided to add a trophy to the school for the most effort, the most consistent growth in the netball player, so that even those who hadn't necessarily been number one, but had put in so much effort, had made so much improvement, also had a space where they had an effort-based reward.
And other than efforts itself, you can also recognize somebody's milestones. You know, when a person accomplishes, like your kid, Avra, accomplishes various milestones in life, right? You would want to be the mom, or you want to be the person that celebrates it together with them. Now, these milestones, in your opinion, might not be as closely related to your everyday life or your life journey. But you know, it never harms to show somebody how much you care about their growth and their next accomplishment that is unlocked. So some examples of milestones could be anniversaries, you know, if they have wedding anniversaries that they have achieved, birthdays, or because, you know, you should be celebrated for your existence, people. And of course, promotions at work itself, you know, if your bosses give you a promotions, or sometimes a milestone could even be moving on from past hurts. If they've moved on, that is also a milestone. Now, so another type of recognition other than accomplishments is tied to your values itself. When you actually recognize somebody's values and ethics in life, this will help you to understand how they actually live and behave. Now, that in itself is a form of utmost respect for how they're actually made, not just what they do. So once you get the ways of recognition, it's not difficult to make it work. Consistently helping people to feel valued and appreciated does not have to be complicated. Simply validate, simply appreciate.
So then if you really think about that question, appreciation versus recognition, is there really a difference? While appreciation and recognition are often used interchangeably, it is important, however, to note that they have slightly different meanings. Appreciation is all about gratitude and admiration for someone, where recognition is about a formal acknowledgement of giving special attention to something. Often, when we talk about recognition ideas, we highlight someone for something they've specifically done. Appreciation is more about generally what they've done. You show appreciation for amazing things people do for you every day. And this is important. And some people forget to do this. The ideas are great for appreciation, recognition, or any positive feedback you have. So what can I say is my message for the day? What have we learned? We've learned that the quality of your life is determined by the quality of your daily achievements. Be who you are and say what you feel, because those who mind don't matter, and those who matter don't mind. Our wonderful Dr. Seuss.
Wonderful quote right there, and hurts deep in the heart, honestly. So Avra, I hope you don't mind me saying this since you mentioned that, but you matter a lot to me.
Oh, thank you.
You do matter a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining. That's right. Thank you for joining us today in the talk. Once again, don't forget to subscribe and also check out the description below to receive your message for the day.
Well, I guess that's a wrap for today. Signing off with love and light to you all. See you soon.
Peace out.